on this edition of the Self-Publishing Show.
You have authors in there who've been consistently in the top 100 of these bestseller lists, year in, year out. So once you've found your niche and you dominate it, there is really, good news that you can maintain position.
Publishing is changing. No more gatekeepers, no more barriers, no one standing between you and your readers. Do you want to make a living from your writing? Join indie bestseller Mark Dawson and first-time author James Blatch as they shine a light on the secrets of self-publishing success. This is the Self-Publishing Show. There's never been a better time to be a writer.
Yes, hello and welcome to the Self-Publishing Show with James Blatch.
And Mark Dawson.
Do you see how excited and dynamic I sounded at the beginning there to go with our dynamic opening?
It's because you've had holiday.
Yes, I've had a holiday. Yes, I've been skiing in the Alps, the most beautiful mountain range in the middle of Europe, and that was very nice. 800 miles down, 800 miles back, which I realise is driving for lunch in Texas, but for us, it's quite a long way to drive.
It's a long way.
And I know we're not supposed to talk about the weather, but I can't help but mention the fact that we seem to be having spring in the middle of February, which is...
End of February.
Sorry?
End of February. It's March tomorrow.
End of February, yeah, that's true. And it will be March by the time this goes out. And we should say right at the top that one of our periodic openings of enrollment, an opportunity to join a premium course created by mainly you, but also me and quite a few other experts around the world, Self-Publishing 101, the foundation course to get you going on your self-publishing career, is open, and you can find more details at selfpublishingformula.com/101. You, sir, have been on the radio.
I have, yes. I was on Radio 4 last Wednesday on Moneybox Live, which was quite entertaining. So that's Radio 4, for those not in the UK, is national radio. So would have been heard by, I don't know what their figures would be, 500,000, something like that.
Yeah, I mean, it's the go. I mean, I have to say it's the default radio station in my house, in my kitchen. So if I go in, I listen to Radio 4 during the day. This is not like America where there's a billion radio stations. It's fairly concentrated. I often describe it as PBS because it sounds a bit like PBS in America and talk radio, news orientated, but it's like PBS, but people listening to it. It's probably the difference.
Yes. So, yeah, I was in there to talk about the financial side of publishing. So not just self-publishing. So we had had an agent from Curtis Brown, who is lovely, called Carolina, who was kind of, I think perhaps they were looking for us to have a scrap, which we weren't going to do this. She was very nice, and I'm not keen on arguing some of the time. So we just had a kind of a back and forth talking about what was possible these days from the trad side and the indie side. And the presenter was asked some decent questions. It's half an hour, which goes by very, very quickly. And they also had some questions from callers calling in. Had a couple of SPF people on the line whilst I was in the studio, which was quite amusing. Elizabeth Hurley was one of them, so thanks for that, Elizabeth. And I had an author who had had a trad deal and did pretty well. I think had about £150,000 advance, but then was explaining how over the course of 2 or 3 years, which is how long that contract ran for, when deductions are taken into account, it doesn't actually amount to a huge amount of money, even though it sounds, when you say it's 150 grand, it sounds like a lot of money, but when you split it down that way, it becomes not quite so much so quickly. And I think her second deal, first book didn't sell all that strongly, and the second deal she made had a £5,000 advance. So wow. From the sublime to the ridiculous for that one. And so we chatted about it for a while, and it was good. I think had a few people on Twitter afterwards because Radio 4 tweeted it out, and then a few large-ish influencers, maybe 10 or 20,000 followers, commented on it. A couple of authors commented on it. Some people had to go at Amazon and all of that kind of nonsense. And so it's had a little bit of back and forth with people saying, a couple of people saying that who just do not get self-publishing. They don't understand it. What I was talking about, why. I think one of my responses was, I didn't understand what the publisher was doing for the 85% that they were taking every time they sold my book once the advance was gone. And someone came back, well, I don't understand what Amazon is doing for its 30%. I was like, why? Really? Okay.
I can see exactly what Amazon's doing.
Yeah, I kind of understand. I mean, Amazon isn't actually doing much in an active capacity, but they built the platform. It's there would be no self-publishing without Amazon. So it was a silly comment. But what I've taken away from that is that if we needed any kind of further underscoring of this, is that people who are listening to this podcast we're miles ahead of the general public. They don't really know. They don't know what's possible. They still think self-publishing is going to a dodgy print shop and filling the back of your car with dodgy paperbacks. And even on the interview, I managed to get my my favorite line at the moment. That vanity publishing is wanting your book in a shop at any price. That's vanity. Whether they understood what I was talking about, I don't know really. But we've had some nice comments as well, and we broadcast into the community, and it is nice to go into bat for indies and independent publishing.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking as well, listening to it, and I'm pleased you said that, is because I'm hopefully on the cusp of publishing my book. So I feel in some ways I'm a bit late. I talk to so many people who are so far ahead, like yourself and others, down the line. I hear people say, well, it was easy in 2009. And occasionally, as somebody in my position, there'll be lots of people listening as well, similarly, thinking, well, is it all going to be mainstream by the time I get there? But we're so far from being the mainstream. We are still this vanguard. Not only is self-publishing still in the vanguard, but if you're listening to this show, you've taken these steps into understanding how to do it properly, you really are in a small minority. But it's the same. There was I think I mentioned this at the time, Newsnight is a BBC television programme in the evening, and the Culture Show, and they had Mary Beard, who's hosts sort of book and author interviews, quite highbrow, and lovely. Drita Say Mitchell was on there fantastically for her and for us in the self-pub industry, because the other three just glazed over the whole prospect of self-publishing and were snobbish to the point of, well, it's not really about the money, said the traditionally published author, who probably in reality was sitting there looking at Drita thinking, well, hang on, how much money are you making? That can't be right. I'll have to come up with some other reasons to why I've signed this deal and signed away all this money. But there you go. So we've got a few years yet before everyone else catches up.
Yeah, exactly. And that does kind of see quite nicely into 101 and the 101 course and what's possible. This is the foundation course that will show people what I've done to build my business to the level it's at now. I had a book out as we record this out today, and that's selling pretty strongly. So
I've seen the emails.
Yeah, so that is the it's the foundation for that kind of business. And you went to see, I know we're gathering testimonials at the moment as we push the course out, and you went to see Jason Dalgleish yesterday.
I did. So the way you say that, Jason Dalgleish sounds like he should be the chief inspector's name in his novel. So he's a crime writer set in the north of England, in Yorkshire, I think. And classically, Jason didn't know, he knew what most people who sit down and write a book knew 10 months ago when this started. And of course, he tried to get an agent. So he put together these bundles, and he did it all, and he heard nothing, did it all again, heard nothing, did it all again, heard nothing, did it all again, got a rejection, did it all again, heard nothing, got a rejection. So 10 go out, a couple of rejections. He's supposed to send 100 out. If you Google the question, how many times should I send out to try and get an agent? But apparently it's 100. And he just thought there's got to be a better way, and stumbled across us, you in particular, took the 101 course, and he said, I'm not particularly technical, so he thought, am I going to be able to do this? Well, 9 months later, he's got 6 figures of income, of turnover. He's predicting he's on course for 150,000 in turnover in his first 12 months, and he wants to double that next year. And we had a conversation afterwards where he said to me, I think doubling it's probably a conservative estimate, but I'm just being cautious about this. I mean, he can't get that smile off his face, and he's smiling because he's writing for a living. And he was telling me his wife is an engineer in power stations, and I think she was on maternity leave. He was a stay-at-home dad, and while she was home as well on maternity leave, she said, look, you always wanted to write. As a kid, you always wanted to. You've talked about it. Why don't you just give it a go now? Just write this book. And so a very short order of time, with a supportive wife and you, the dual crown, his life's been turned around, which is fantastic. So he's a lovely guy to meet, and we can't get enough of those stories. We hear them quite often, but we can't get enough of them. That's what's exciting about our community at the moment, and I mean that in the wider sense of self-publishing.
Yeah, absolutely. I saw the testimony, and he is He's smiling like a Cheshire cat all the way through it. And it's great. I love those kinds of stories because it's people realizing, it isn't rocket science. I'm not technically amazing either, but if I can do it, I think I can teach it pretty well. And it is just a question of sucking up the information, putting it into practice, and writing good books. Obviously, that's a given. You have to be able to write good books, but provided you can do that, it's never been easier to find readers and to sell books and to make often significant amounts of money. And Jason is very far from being the exception or unusual when it comes to making six figures a year from self-publishing. I can probably, if I put my head around to it, I could probably think of about 50 people. And of course, Amazon, in the investors letter last year, Bezos said, I think they know of 1,000 authors who have made 100,000 or more in terms of their income through KDP only in 2016 or 2017. So I love that stat, because what that doesn't say is how many people made 50,000 or how many people made more than they would have made as a traditionally published author. So like 10 or 15,000. It's got to be thousands. So that kind of information is if you need inspiration and motivation to push on, then that's what you need.
And who wouldn't say no to $1,000 a month?
Absolutely, from sitting in your pants writing.
Yeah, sitting in your pants writing, and even if you're still doing your full-time job, pays your mortgage and gets you doing what you love, which is writing. So all of that's happening at the moment, and we are listen to this show in the right place at the right time, I think, which is great. So selfpublishingformula.com/101 if you want to learn more about the 101 course. I've told Jason I really think he would be a good podcast interviewee a bit further down the line. So later this year, I'll go back. I mean, luckily he lives next to a very busy frontline Royal Air Force fighter station. So I was able to stop and see some F-35s flying on the way back. So I should go and visit him again. Yeah, I will do.
James Blatchkey.
Being caught. But I'd like to hear the detail, over sort of 40 minutes of exactly what steps he took, how he went from having his finished manuscript to $100,000 income in 9 months. And I think we'd all like to hear that. Right. I want to welcome our a couple of Patreon supporters who've joined us this week. They are Ellis Johnson. Do you know how to say this, by the way? You're an East Anglian boy, aren't you? Can you see it in the chat?
No, I can't. I can say Ellis Johnson.
She's from Bungay in Suffolk.
Yes, Bungay. It's very near Lowestoft. I can pronounce Bungay.
You can say Bungay, yeah. So Ellis Johnson's from
American
Bungay
people, Suffolk. Actually, non-Americans, non-English people, it looks like Bungay, but it's actually pronounced Bungay. So that's your pointless fact of the week.
Yes. You don't say Bengay, do you, for Bengay, for the cream?
I do.
Oh, you do?
No,
I see. And Jason Bonnet, who's from Kansas City.
I think that's Bonnet, actually.
Bonnet.
Not really. I'm sorry, Jason.
And what state is Kansas City in?
That is in, oh goodness, how annoying. Missouri? No. Goodness, that's annoying. I should know that. Do you know that, or are you just teasing me?
No, I do know it. But the border goes, I think, through the city, but I have a feeling that famously the Kansas City Royals are in the other state.
What state is it?
What? I've forgotten.
Oh, so you don't know. When you said you knew it, you were lying.
I've forgotten it. I used to know this fact. Everyone's shouting at us again on the radio. But there's a state line goes, what's the next state? It's not Missouri, is it? Maybe it is Missouri. St. Louis is Missouri, isn't it? It's around there. I don't know.
We're making ourselves look really stupid, so let's carry on.
Old men rambling about stuff they don't know. Good. Now, we have a really data-heavy episode today. Do you like your data? Are you a data man? Are you a data guy? You're not a data guy.
I'm not the data guy. We know who that is.
We know who.
I like data. I wouldn't pretend to be a genius at it, but I like a nice spreadsheet.
I like a nice spreadsheet too. And a guy who really likes it is called Alex Newton. Actually, he's called Alex Newholz, but we say Newton because people have difficulty getting their tongue around that German surname. And Alex has been one of the people, we talk about Vanguard, in an area of scraping and analyzing and giving you an easy access to the type of granular detail that, in any big company, there'll be small departments of analysts who work there, really pouring through the detail, knowing that there's gold somewhere in there, that they can find these gaps in the market, if they can see which way trends are going, they can improve the profit line of their company. Well, these are the sorts of things that as independents running our small businesses, we need to be doing as well. And we can do it thanks to the help of people like Alex. So Alex is the founder of K-Lytics. I think he explains in the interview that he couldn't call it KDP Lytics, so it's called K-Lytics to kind of give that away. And the interview is self-explanatory, and there's a bit of stuff to go with it as well. So if you're watching on YouTube, you can see some of the graphs that Alex is talking about. And believe me, if you're selling books at the moment, you will definitely want to go and check this out. So let's hear from Alex, then Mark and I will be back for a chat off the back.
This is the Self-Publishing Show. There's never been a better time to be a writer.
Alex, welcome to the Self-Publishing Show, live from Germany.
Well, thank you very much for having me. Hello, everybody.
It's a bit like the Eurovision Song Contest, this, isn't it? We're linking up Europe in a harmonious moment at a time where Europe's not as harmonious as it could be.
It is right. But right now, here I live in a small town in Germany, a small village. The world is cool, sun is shining, winter is probably finishing, hopefully soon. So everything fine on this end.
Excellent. Well, I hope winter doesn't finish quite yet because I'm going skiing in 10 days.
All right.
So I need winter. I need winter for one more week. Good. Excellent. Alex, look, thank you so much. You've been in this industry for a long time, 20 odd years, I think, probably in publishing from beginning to end.
Well, I think one has to be precise. Now, in the self-publishing industry, I've been for 5 years, ever since I started up with K-Lytics. I started some 20 years ago in the very publishing industry, but then I basically spent 20 years in corporate strategy consulting, and there I basically worked very much across industry, both media, transportation, you name it. So it was basically a school to learn how to analyze problems and hopefully explain the solutions based on data and facts in a very simple way.
Oh, that's interesting. So I hadn't realized that your analyst background stretches across multi-industries.
No, there's multiple industry. In fact, I worked for the big five consulting companies. I've been a partner in PwC before I left. Before that, Booz Allen Hamilton. So big strategy consulting firm. So the whole philosophy there, working across industries, was to try to shed light into complex problems, but using facts rather than opinions. So I spent 20 years crunching numbers, or in the end, obviously have team members crunch the numbers and try to draw conclusions for corporate CEOs.
And every one of our self-published authors is a corporate CEO of their own little company. So this stuff is important to them. And we're in a golden age of data, aren't we? So I guess when you started 20 odd years ago, there was still surveys and some, the data wasn't as precise as today. The amount of precise data available to us is awe-inspiring.
Well, absolutely. I mean, back in the days, you did have the data, but it usually took quite some effort to make it into an analyzable format. Spreadsheets were just at the very beginning, databases were there, but it was cumbersome. I think nowadays the issue is you have big data, but that doesn't necessarily mean big information. So I think the big challenge nowadays is to turn big data, whether it is for big corporations or for a self-published author, to turn it into actionable information, which is quite different from data.
Okay, well, look, we're going to talk about K-Lytics in particular, but first of all, I want to really pick your mind as a man behind the data to give us some big answers then, now that you've set out your stall there. So here's a big one. We've had, famously, this appears to have been a downslide in ebook purchases, which the traditional publishing industry seemed to laud a couple of years ago, and that's been, I think, debunked. What's your view at the moment of how buoyant the market is? If we look at KDP, for instance?
Well, I think you have to see two sides of the equation. The one side is obviously the supply side of the industry. So are authors still investing time, money, and creative resource into bringing out new works? And there the answer is a very clear yes. I mean, the current status is we have more than 5 million English-speaking titles on Kindle. And last year, there was a growth of about 20%. That's 74,000 new titles every month that people put up on Kindle. So there is a relentless influx of new title. And actually, what came to a surprise to us, it was a re-acceleration, because the year before we had some, I think, 17% growth in titles. Actually, only 14% in 2017, and back in 2016 it was around 17% growth in titles. So this year, 20% growth in titles as we entered into 2019. So the supply side is very buoyant. And then you might ask, well, but how about the demand? Because if these books end up on the virtual shelf and nobody's reading or buying them, obviously we have a problem with oversupply. And here, I think the interesting part of the story is that, yes, the big publishing organizations, the Trad Publisher Trade Association, they try to give you the notion that it's shrunk the market. So, for example, the Association of American Publishers, they reported in their latest numbers were quarter three 2018, that ebooks, which for them represents only 6% of their market value, shrunk by 3%. And we asked, how come people, invest 20% more in time and resource year on year if there is no demand? So Amazon does not publish, they don't publish what their exact sales is on KDP, but you have indicators such as the global select fund, which grew to, $268 million in 2018, which is also a growth by 20%. Now, does that mean the number of ebook reads has risen? Well, if the payout per page has been fairly constant, so Amazon is not throwing money after the author to the authors by page, the share of books enlisted in KU has been very constant, around 30 to 35%, and there is no indication that people just read more pages of their borrowed books, right? So that's one clear indicator that ebooks have risen in demand still. But the most remarkable indicator we had was that if you look at the overall bestseller list on the Amazon store, not the Kindle bestsellers, the overall ones, which people think they're print bestseller lists, but they're not. They're cross-format. And if you click on any book, it will take you to that format that currently achieves the highest sales. And there we found a huge increase in the penetration, if you will, of bestseller lists by ebooks, as well as audiobooks, and prints were getting squeezed in the middle. So thumbs up, supply is growing. I wouldn't argue that the demand for ebooks is growing by the same pace, but I'd say there is clearly an upside on the demand side for ebooks. Good news for all authors out there.
Yeah, and it reinforces what I think people know in their gut, which is that more people are publishing and moving to self-publishing. And that means, of course, that it's a more competitive market, which makes it even more important that people listen to the self-publishing show and they follow and they use services like K-Lytics to try and get an edge where they can. So let's start dialing down into some of the specifics, if you don't mind, Alex. First of all,
sure.
Some genres are more competitive than others, and I think your analysis is able to show that.
Yes, I mean the whole supply side is an interesting one because you have a certain gauge for genres via the categories, and now with some tricks you can still get Amazon to display the very size of categories, and you have like 7,000 of them, right? And if you dive into these 7,000, you have like the 30 big ones. And in terms of book supply, what also always came to a surprise to me was religion and spirituality is the largest in book supply, as an example,
wow,
in terms of competitiveness. So more than 540,000 English-speaking titles are religion and spirituality, which
we're all searching for something, Alex.
Yeah, we're all searching for answers, right? The very next one, unsurprisingly, romance, with close to 500,000 English-speaking titles, followed by children's ebooks, interestingly, because there is no demand whatsoever for children's ebooks, but everybody thinks they're so easy to publish for the last 10 years. So that's an interesting one. As well as history is huge, and business and money in terms of book supply. And the interesting bit is that obviously on the demand side, you have a completely different pattern. I mean, the number one we measure is clearly romance, followed by mystery, thriller, suspense, and sci-fi and fantasy. So there's a bit of a mismatch between supply and demand. And then you can really drill down into these 7,000 categories. And there are, I think, more than 400 that have only one book in it. So if you wanted to be a number one bestseller, you could go into some odd category and say, I'm now the expert for travel in South Dakota regions, US, and write your travel book, and you'll be a number one bestseller in 24 hours or so.
Even if you just use Google Street View, maybe to write it.
Exactly. So, but the point being is, and I can also, if you want, just very briefly illustrate this.
Sure. So we should say for those people who are listening that, as always, we say, have a look at these on YouTube, because a lot of time and effort goes into the video production. And because we're talking about analytics, there are some graphs here. So we're going to bring some of those into view. In fact, I'm going to do that now, because I can see, Alex, you've put a very colourful graph up on the screen. Now, you do have to bear in mind, some people are only listening, so you will need to explain it. This looks to me, let me describe, it looks biological to me.
Yeah, it looks like cells under the microscope. So for those people who are listening, it's basically a big graph of almost like snowflakes. And people who know K-Analytics know this graph. It is basically the trademark graph, because it shows the whole Kindle market on very one page. And every little dot, of which there are like 3,000 on one page, represents a category. And basically, it is the dot. The more it is to the right of this very graph, the higher the level of competition. So it ranges from categories that have 100 titles in it to categories that have more than 100,000 titles in it. And the higher up the little dot is on the very graph, the higher the level of sales. And what you can see on that is there are categories where you have very high sales compared to a relatively low level of competition. That is what we call the green zone. We call it hot markets, being very small markets, which we call hot cells with less than 2,000 titles, very hot niches, hot mainstream. So without wanting to confuse the people, but it's actually very easy to grasp that you just start looking, if you are into right to market or want to hone whatever you do a little bit more to the economics of the business, which if you're an entrepreneur and a self-publisher, you should look at the economics of the business. You just have to face the facts that if you want to write a book about gardening and horticulture, the average sales rank across the top 50,000 titles is, top 20 titles is less than 50,000 in the store. So you won't pay the bills with that. However, if you go into attractive niche markets such as take military romance or these sub romance categories, you can potentially make a living.
So this is a really useful graph, and it gives me an opportunity to talk a bit about K-Lytics before we go on talking about the industry. So K-Lytics, clearly somebody who is a subscriber, I guess, to your service has access to this level of information. Do you want to just explain what K-Lytics is?
Well, in a very nutshell, and I took notes here because if I only knew what it was, right?
Yeah, right. But if you don't know.
So if I don't know, Mark Doss might not know. Joking aside, it was so funny because you gave me an honorable mention in I think, podcast 135 you had about the Indie Author Toolkit. And there, Mark explained to you what K-Lytics is. And he said, I quote, K-Lytics is a service whereby reports are generated looking at niches and genres that may be underserved. So high in demand, low competition niches that would be good if you're looking into right to market. And so you can pay them, the K-Lytics guys, you can actually pay them to produce specific reports on something you'll be particularly interested in. So it's a data service that will enable you to make decisions about your writing. Now, I don't know whether he's read anything about it or just heard that, but when we started out 5 years ago, I said my mission is basically to enable authors and publishers to make better and faster publishing decisions using data. So in essence, we have a big database of some 7,000 plus genres where we monitor the performance of all these categories. And since some people are not into spreadsheets and using databases, we have like ready-made genre reports. So if you are into, like Mark, potentially into vigilante justice, we have a whole report that just, dissects the whole market on vigilante justice. And any genre almost. And if you say, no, that's not covered by us, I'm more interested in writing a nonfiction book about the mating behavior of Chinese vineyard snails, then we would prepare a custom report for you on that.
Okay. And how do people, it's a subscription service, or do you buy in and commission, or?
Well, since we're serving both, authors who may be focused only on one genre all the way to publishing companies, we have basically two models. You can go onto the K-Lytics shop, k-lytics.com/shop, where you can look at individual market reports. Or you can, if you say, no, I also want to have access to all whatever videos, tutorials, and the big database, you can buy a monthly or annual subscription and have basically all access to all of the data that we use and generate, use, and publish.
Okay, so let's take somebody who's perhaps written, in fact, I can think of an exact example. I'm going to quote her, Cecilia Mecca, who's a prominent member of the SPF community, who's been writing in one genre, and I think commercially, as well as just stretching herself, wants to choose another genre and has recently done so. So she might go to K-Lytics and would be able to, on a one-off basis, purchase the amount of data reports that she needs to make a decision about what particular brand of urban fantasy or romance, whatever she chooses.
Absolutely. So we would have reports on urban fantasy, paranormal romance, historical romance. If you're an elite member, you would get, say, in historical romance, additional sub-reports on what's Regency, what's Victorian doing, what's Scottish doing, Highlander romance, World War II romance, you name it. So that is how it works. And we have a couple of authors who basically just want to, stay tuned with trends that are across genres, because they look at, well, I'm into mystery, thriller, and suspense, but I really want to know what's happening in romance right now. And then, all of a sudden you see the romantic suspense going up there, and you say, well, I could potentially do that too, with my thriller and mystery background. So, even people who are focused on one genre, we have many authors who are subscribers who just want to see what's happening across genres, what's trending.
Great. Well, I think Cecilia's probably one of many, many authors who know they can write, enjoy writing, and want a change of genre. So this would be an excellent stopping off point for them to make that decision. Okay, well, let's get back to what the data's telling you at the moment, Alex, if you don't mind.
Sure.
Another question that I've got is where indies are, because my feeling is that their market share is growing. Do we know that for sure?
Well, and now we do. There are no official numbers, but so we usually we're focused more on, like the tactical or actionable stuff for an author, so not like the big level numbers. But we made an experiment last year and monitored the top 24,000 books, which basically constitutes like probably 80% of the sales, and monitored them over a couple of months in 2018, these bestseller list positions. And then we looked at the sales ranks, ironed out the peaks and valleys, and basically calculated, what is the market share of indies, basically all the books that have only, just an author name, or not even a publisher name. So you can approximate what's happening. And all the big publishers have obviously on the book page their publisher name. And the result was like super surprising, because on KU, the single largest market share is with indie authors, and it was 37%. So it's absolutely staggering. Yeah. And it may even be a conservative estimate. And then the next one was the big five, so we saw the big five as the one aggregated unit, and then followed, and growing very, very strongly, the aggregate of all the Amazon imprints. So I think you guys out there, indie authors, hybrid authors, whoever, you guys rock, because you seem right now to grab the largest bit of the pie. And I think that is remarkable. And I congratulate everyone out there who's been a part of the journey.
Wow, well, that's great to hear that, because it certainly feels like that, but often the data, as you say, is counterintuitive to the way you feel. But that confirms something. And I think probably might be conservative because a lot of indie authors make their books look as traditionally published as possible, including having a publishing company name in there. So very possibly that's a slight underrepresentation, which is amazing.
Yeah, absolutely. So basically, we only took, even big guys like Michael Anderle and team, they wouldn't even be in there, or they would clearly label themselves indie. So it may even be a conservative estimate. So I find it completely remarkable.
And in financial terms, Alex, how much is that share worth? Do you know?
Frankly, it's a bit tough to estimate, but there are rumors out there that like the complete market for ebooks, US based, is anything between like $1 billion and $1.5 billion, taking this huge 85% overall Amazon share in the market and not just what the industry is out there. But I think, data guy is probably more into those whole aggregate numbers for the whole market, which are hugely debated. Yeah, so it's a huge chunk of money.
Well, that's $370 million on that one particular platform for the indie share as a conservative estimate. So there's money out there to be grabbed. Well, we know that Dawson took $1 million of it last year. So
there you go.
That's not there for us anymore. He's got that. Okay, look, let's move on to how people can action this then. Alex, when you look at this data, does it give you clues as to how the successful indie authors are being successful? I mean, apart from writing good books and marketing well, is there something they're doing in terms of placement that we can learn from?
Well, absolutely. They have the secret formula. They publish numerous high quality books in great quantity. So no, joking aside, that's the magic, obviously the magic formula. But there is actually something to it on and off the data. The one is, which is off the data, that's more my personal belief. There is the quality side of the game, which has, clearly also changed over the years from very low quality to higher quality, where I think right now to really succeed out there, if you look at many of the indie authors, they bring a certain level, of craft skill. They bring knowledge for the genre they write about. So, if you take a guy who writes military sci-fi, who has a military background, that will work. A person who's been very successful in military romance, she has a son who serves as a Navy SEAL. A person who's into legal thrillers, which comes with very high entry barriers because you have to have legal knowledge. There's knowledge. And that is combined in these people, to my mind, with that they have a passion for it. Because if you write legal thrillers but have no passion for it, it won't work. And this is where the data comes into play. They usually address a viable market. So as we discussed earlier, that they target a market which is high in demand, and there is hardly any market where you don't have competition. But it's a difference whether you write in vigilante justice thrillers, as an example, where you have say a book supply of some 2,000 in the category, versus you write contemporary romance, very broadly defined, with more than 100,000 titles in it. So that is the one thing that the data shows about the viability of the market of these indies. And the other is the prolificness, the quantity of it. So when we looked at, we could also aggregate this data by the top indie authors. And the top 50 indie authors, each of them had at least at any point in time 15 books displayed in the top 24,000 at any point in time. And obviously those who earn the real money have whatever 10, 15 titles at any point in time in the top 2,000, top, you name it. So we then took all the data together, and the interesting bit was that about 40% of the whole royalty pie is constituted by published titles with an age or shelf life of less than a month old, right? So there is this balance between you have to constantly churn out new stuff. That's where 40% of the royalties are, new titles. And the other thing is obviously managing your backlist in a good way, because the other 60% are with books that are older than, not 60%, but there's a huge chunk, I think 55% of the books that are older than 1 year.
Okay, so contemporaneous, your freshly released books are going to disproportionately earn your income. again underlines what you jokingly said at the beginning: is write more stuff and get it out there. Okay, I mean, fascinating to think about these genres, and I guess for some people it's almost coincidental that they happen to love and they've chosen accidentally before they even thought about the commercial aspects of it, a genre that's in that hot area, that's not so competitive but well read. And going back to the biological looking graph, can you give us some more specifics? If people are genuinely listening to this thinking, do you know what, I could write in almost anything, but tell me what I should be looking at if I want to choose a hot topic.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, first of all, as important as tell people what to write is what not to write, where, because you don't want to be in this area where, you have hundreds and hundreds of categories or genres where the demand for just the top 20 titles, so the very top of these categories, the demand is as low that you have less than 50,000 as a sales rank as an average across the top 20. So, if you, as an example, took the worst selling category on that we measured last year, it would be hey, I write something nonfiction, crafts, hobbies, and home, woodworking decoys, for those, I even had to look it up. Like a duck decoy is a man-made object resembling a real duck, and duck decoys are sometimes used in duck hunting. There is a category for that,
That's quite niche.
But that is quite a niche. Well, you have like 2 books in it or so.
I mean, to write in that category, you'd have to be crackers.
I tell you, there is stuff out there, really bad selling categories. So in general, you find a lot of these in the whole nonfiction arena, where you have the problem that, things like self-help, business and money, well, they do sell, but they sell more print and they're like super highly competitive. And the small ones where people tell you, make a fortune on Kindle, upload your grandma's cookbook. Obviously, that ain't work. If you look at the least competitive categories, there are tons and tons of categories with only 1 to 10 titles in it, but the demand is also very low. But why am I saying this? If you don't write for the money, but you write for the authority. So you say, I'm, for example, in silk screen and batik, graphic design, and I want to be the authority there. And you say, hey, I have this book, and it is a legitimate #1 bestseller on Amazon, that may help you to monetize your passion in another channel, whether it's YouTube or information product, you name it. So also these bad categories can be very helpful, but not to directly make money, but to claim your spot in terms of authority. But I know many of the people listening are obviously, hey, what's happening here on the, if we resume the share, what is happening here in this hot zone of categories where you have anything between 2,000 and 10,000 titles or even less in like sky high sales ranks. And, some of the good ones here just had a current look. Very brand new categories such as domestic thrillers are big, thrillers that are in, not necessarily only hometown, but where the whole thing plays in the at-home neighborhood. Domestic thrillers, brand new category. Amazon just opened it up. Had only this month 200 titles in it and sky-high sales. Historical fiction, World War II has been doing well. Westerns, Frontier and Pioneer. Who thought that, these mail-order bride romance is dead? It's had a big upturn. In mystery thriller suspense, this green zone, you would have things like what Mark is writing in Vigilante Justice. Very strong things like female protagonist thrillers. There is no specific category for it, so we analyze it across categories. In romance, in this area, you have stuff like clean and wholesome romance, which we've been measuring over 3 years and which been doing exceptionally well as a counter trend to this whole 50 Shades of Grey and erotica stuff that people get tired of. Brand new category also there since last month on Amazon is romance, action, and adventure. So they try to find another home for, romantic suspense, but not so suspenseful, more action and stuff. So that is new. And also for the sci-fi guys, here you have the military sci-fi, military fantasy, dragons, mythical creatures, the game literature, all there in this green zone. So a couple of good markets, and we You can have another look at it if you want towards the end in the tool if you're interested.
Well, it's interesting that you talk about how some of the categories have changed. So you must notice trends. I guess some categories die a death, and other categories appear or suddenly start doing well.
It depends on which level. So you have basically 30 main categories ranging from romance all the way to travel. They basically hardly change over the years. We've seen only 1 or 2 changes in 5 years. The next level down gets a little more dynamic, but this is where actually it was a big change to suddenly have last month Amazon opened in this huge romance category. That they opened a dedicated category for medical romance. So, romance involving doctors and that sort of stuff, a whole subcategory. So we'll be looking more into that one. So these changes happen, but it's more on the level 3, 4, and 5 that you see Amazon fiddling around with. And very often they come up with categories where people go, instead of putting up a category where you may have real demand, such as lit RPG, although I know there's a trademark issue because I think the lead author has claimed a trademark for lit RPG, or reverse harem, you name it, these, trendy things in 2018, there's no dedicated category. So you also have to look across category.
Yes, I was introduced to reverse harem very recently, and it was a new one on me, I have to say. Okay, so let's get your crystal ball out. I mean, one of the things data people do. I mean, I have to say we're in a period of economic uncertainty with Brexit going on at the moment, and the people who are making predictions about the future are making a good living on TV. Although I'm not convinced many of them are getting anything right. But it could be described as a mug's game in England. But do you have some ideas for the future that are revealing themselves in the data? That what's going to happen?
Well, I think it is very interesting to see that unlike what people believe, things in the book market don't change overnight, right? And so this is when you jump on because some people are, Alex, this month you're saying this is a hot niche, but then next month, do I have to jump at a new genre? And, there is changes, but there's also things that are very stable. And, just to illustrate that one here, because I think that opens the eye a bit for people who are watching and engaging trends. Let me just resume here one slide. And for those people who are just listening, this is a slide because we monitor the categories. We've been monitoring them now for close to 5 years, and that allows to look at stuff over time. And this is where it becomes really interesting and also a bit different because many people go onto the Amazon website, they see something trending today, but 3 hours later, it is not trending. And that's the most dangerous thing you can do because sales ranks fluctuate by anything plus minus 25%, depending in which range you are in just, a couple of hours. So you have to aggregate the data and look at it over time. So for example, here, this graph, if you're listening, shows the average sales rank of the category teen, young adult, romance, sci-fi, and dystopian. So this whole Hunger Games thing where many young authors have been making a good living from, And you see, there was the peak around 2015 where you still had the wake of this whole Hunger Games and the other big blockbuster movies. And you see it's been trending down ever since until the mid 2017. And then in 2018, we started something for it to pick up again. Now, that is the Amazon data. And you see it's a trend. It's not like from 1 week to the other. It's an evolution over time.
Yeah, and I think we should point out to people who can't see it that the actual nodes on this, the points, data points on this graph show dramatic peaks and troughs, and yet what you've shown with a green line through the middle of it is the longer term trend, and that's what you need to focus on, because the fact that from February 2017 to August 2017, it looked like there'd been a massive resurgence of it, but actually once you plotted out over a period of time, it was just part of it bottoming out at that point.
Exactly. So what I always tell people is, don't look at the Kindle market just, in real time and you see whatever that one green smoothie book up there, and you know that has been pushed with some. You get the idea. It's really happening over longer periods of time. Interestingly, you can then validate those trends for you if you go on Google Trends, which is like hugely a great tool. And what you see here, if you were to watch this on YouTube, we looked at the very same thing for the search word teen dystopian over a period of 10 years. And if you just put a trend line through it and look at that same period we just had on Amazon, it's almost like, the search interest on Google for teen dystopian shows a very similar pattern if you iron out the peaks and valleys, peaks and troughs of the short-term fluctuations. So just to illustrate, things happen over time. And just one last example is we've always been asked what's happening to erotica versus clean and wholesome. I'm a big fan of, clean romance, not because I read it, but it's a remarkably underestimated market. Everybody is jumping into hot and steamy erotica, and you have more than 100,000 titles in that versus, still a pretty contained clean and wholesome romance category with both contemporary clean and wholesome, where you see a lot of the erotica themes like billionaire romance being taken into the cleaner realm, so less steamy reads, and doing remarkably well. And here, we see a trend line of declining erotica things, which I know we've discussed this a lot among authors, has also some reasons with Amazon suppressing the erotica categories and you name it. But, overall, you can get to interesting discussions and for some people, very interesting conclusions once you start monitoring these things a bit over time.
Yeah.
So you asked me for the crystal ball,
yeah.
Where is it going to go? Well, there are a couple of, good things out there. I think in mystery, thriller, suspense, we will continue to see. We will just look at it again in the months to come. Female protagonist thrillers, which are not cozy. So cozy mystery, by the way, still remarkably strong. It's the third year we do the study on it. Which cozy mystery is still super strong, and you have authors in there who've been consistently in the top 100 of these bestseller lists, year in, year out. So once you've found your niche and you dominate it, there is really, good news that you can maintain position. So going forward in mystery, thriller, suspense, we probably see another strong season for female protagonist thrillers, these whole domestic thrillers, psychological thrillers going on. We will also redo the vigilante justice one, which continues to be strong. Sci-fi, there's a bit hard to predict. There are a lot of. We just did the science fiction overview report, looking at like 130 of these categories, and the good news is they're like super good niches out there. But it's very hard from a trend perspective to to see what's gonna really be the trending thing, because game literature, lit RPG, it's been trending, but it's a bit probably too geeky to become mainstream really in terms of big sales, right? Other things, however, were very mainstream, dystopian on the wake of Handmaid's Tale. Then the whole EMP and thriller, the zombie stuff was still doing well and is probably continuing. So, because the one thing we also see is you have a certain trend, even blockbuster movies, and then you have people making money off books for 10 years. The best example, I think, is Twilight and vampire romance. And you have then Bella Forrest monetizing on it even after the third blockbuster of Twilight was already out of the movie theaters. She continued for 7 years with Shades of Vampire on Kindle, making a fortune.
Yeah, people looking for that. Great. Well, Alex, you better remind people where they can find you.
Well, you can always Google k-analytics.com, but we will also certainly put something together into a link at k-analytics.com/SPF or self-publishing formula, so that you get some free sample. I might even put up for a certain period of free trial. So you just, who's interested can have a look and and learn more about us.
Yeah, well, it's k-lytics.com.
It's exactly. So it's K, which is for Kindle, but since we cannot use that trademark, it's K hyphen minus sign lytics, like in analytics.com/SPF.
Excellent. Now, the other place I can find you, I think, was at the bar in Vegas. You seem to be there quite a lot.
Oh, but always having my non-alcoholic ginger ale.
Is that what you were drinking? That's clever because it looks exactly like beer. It's the same color.
Exactly. That's how I could get all this, industry intelligence without, telling people.
You were grilling me for that industry intelligence those nights. Well, I enjoyed catching up with you in Vegas. Are you going to be traveling this year, Alex?
Yes, it looks like that. It looks like I just booked to be back in Vegas for the 20K conference. Maybe, there are a couple of events. Usually I spend my time here in the cave or in my rooftop, analyzing the numbers and also with my team. But it was really fun, as I said on stage in Vegas. Oh, there's real authors out there, not just numbers and columns of numbers, real people. It's exciting. Yeah. And meeting you at the bar there was clearly, it's worth going again.
Yeah, well, it was a big moment for both of us. Excellent. Well, I'm looking forward to it. We'll be at a couple of those conferences as well, and we'll catch up. Excellent. Great work, Alex. Fantastic to hear how the industry's doing, and in particular, how well indies are doing as part of it. So thank you so much indeed for joining us.
Thank you very much for having me on the show.
This is the Self-Publishing Show. There's never been a better time to be a writer.
Alex Newton, and as soon as he popped up on the screen, I remembered that we'd shared a couple of beers in Vegas together. He's a nice guy, and he's not your archetypal. I'm not going to use the word nerd, because it's a nerdy industry, isn't it? When you say, I'm going to do a company that scrapes data and gives you all this analysis and granular detail for your company, you are thinking nerd. But Alex is very personable.
You're very rude.
Yeah.
I just think clever person.
Yeah, I like nerds, though. There's nothing wrong with nerds. This is the age of the nerd.
True.
But Alex is not only a nerd, he's a really nice guy as well. And K-Lytics, this is a service I think you're already familiar with, right?
Yes, I am. So Alex produced a report for me just as we were talking about doing the podcast. He sent me over some information on thrillers and mysteries and stuff, just so I could have a look at what he's looking at. And yeah, it's interesting. It's a very good product, and he cuts it up and makes it easily digestible, because it would be quite easy to be swamped by the numbers and all the calculations and the conjecture that goes with it. So it's a nice product. Definitely recommend it.
Good. Okay. Well, I think that's it for this week.
Missouri.
Missouri.
It is Missouri.
To Google that though. It is Missouri. You've had to Google.
Pretty
that,
sure I said that, James.
Yeah, I think you were scrabbling about and it came out at some point. Good. That's it. So I'll just remind you that our 101 course is open for a couple of weeks only. We'll be open again probably once again at the end of this year. So if you're thinking of jumping in, now's the time. So if you go to selfpublishingformula.com/101, you will get all the details that you need. And of course, in our Facebook group, we post lots of stuff all the time. And I think we will probably by this point next week, when this goes out, have posted that Jason Dalgleish testimonial. Try and make sure it's one of the first ones we post in.
Yeah, we will do. We will definitely. And also, whilst I remember, London Book Fair is coming up quite soon.
Yes.
And on March the 13th, which is the Wednesday of the Book Fair week, we will be having SPF drinks. We'll be buying drinks in the Hand and Flower. That's the Bird and Flower. The Hand and Flower, which is over the road from Olympia in London. So we'll all be there. Possibly
you'll be late.
I will be late because I've got something else to go to before. So I'm trying to. I always have to run around a lot at London Book Fair, but I will be there eventually. Probably drunk, although not as drunk as everyone else was last time, as I seem to remember.
There were some very drunk people last time.
There were,
and I may have been among them.
You were.
Yeah. So we'll be at the Hand and Flower. So if you walk out of Olympia, it's the Hammersmith Road, and it's just sort of if you turn left out of the front door of Olympia, you'll find it. We'll be there probably from about 7ish on the Wednesday night, Wednesday the 13th. Come along and we will buy you a beer and celebrate amongst the traditional publishers surrounding us on the top deck of the Titanic.
That's right. We'll be flicking V's through the windows as they talk about their latest six-figure deals.
As the Titanic brushes the iceberg, we shall just hold out our gin and tonics to collect a bit of ice to
Very good.
help us drink. Good. Thank you so much indeed for listening to the Self-Publishing Show this week. We're back next week. We've got a whole really good set of interviews coming up soon, so in the next few weeks. So do stay with us. We love hearing from you. You can always contact us, support@selfpublishingformula.com, and you can leave us a review at iTunes and all those things, which I think probably Huey says in a minute anyway, but it means a lot to us. And of course, you can support the podcast at patreon.com if you go to patreon.com/self-publishing show. I think that's it. That was all one breath.
It's very good.
Missouri.
So, it's goodbye from me.
And it's goodbye from him.
Goodbye.
Bye. Got to get that in bit right.
Get show notes, the podcast archive, and free resources to boost your writing career at selfpublishingshow.com. Join our thriving Facebook group at selfpublishingshow.com/Facebook. Support the show at patreon.com/selfpublishingshow. And join us next week for more help and inspiration so that you can make your mark as a successful indie author. Publishing is changing, so get your words into the world and join the revolution with the Self-Publishing Show.